kind of resonates with who I am as a person and career counselor. So it's all about the planned happenstance component is about following your curiosity. So it was developed almost simultaneously by John Krumboltz and Al Levine, who are professors at Stanford University. John passed a couple of years ago. Kathleen Mitchell, interestingly enough, she was a career counselor at San Francisco City College, and they found out about each other's work serendipitously, and then he started working together on the theory. Kathleen wrote her own book, John and Al wrote their own book. So the gist of it is that the career decision-making is a lifelong process. And that indecision can be a sensible approach to our complex and unpredictable future. It doesn't mean indecision forever and ever and ever and ever, but it means temporary indecision until you feel comfortable and the decision feels right. So how can we predict the future in today's changing world? It might have been easier in the past, but not so much in today's world. A couple of quotes here, one by the physicist Niels Bohr. Prediction is very difficult, especially when they're about the future. And this goes all the way back to ancient China and the Taoist philosophy, Lao Tzu. Those who have knowledge don't predict. Those who predict don't have knowledge. So, in other words, prediction may not be the best approach to moving forward. So, change is accelerated, as we all know. We're all experiencing that. 200 years ago, career choices and work were pretty much dictated for us by the culture that we grew up in, our family situation, whether we were farmers or we were tradespeople, or we were in the upper class and had people working for us. So, but that changed with the Industrial Revolution, and things kept increasingly changing quickly, and until technology is developed, and now technology is so accelerated. It's just amazing what we see happening. I read in LinkedIn, some of you may have seen it, that there's a new job title called CREO, Remote Chief Remote Executive Officer. Have any of you heard that one yet? So the person in the company that's in charge of the remote workers. So you've heard this before. With in today's world, we may be changing. We doesn't necessarily will be, but we may be changing careers many times during our lifetime. There are a few people who do still work the jobs they started out in, but that's the exception. So think about where we're at right now. I mean, we didn't see the pandemic coming, right? And all the changes that ensued. What's the next 10 years going to bring? And how is that going to have an impact on our career and the economy and the careers in general? So feel free to jump in with observations as we go through this. I'm perfectly fine with that. So John Krumboltz, when he was at Stanford University, psychologist, conducted a study. So he did a longitudinal study, that's a long-term study, of graduating high school seniors who are entering college. And he asked them what they saw is their career when they graduated from college. And after 20 years, he wasn't able to find all of them, but he found a good percentage of them. And he asked them, okay, what's your career now? So what do you think the percentage was after 20 years of those students who said, okay, this is a career I'm going to be working in? And after 20 years, what percentage of them do you think were in that career? Anyone take a guess?
5%.
5%? You're close. It is 2. So his point was that chances are we may be in a different career than we think we're going to go into. So think about some of your successful past experiences. How did you get there? What were the chain of events that got you there? Was it linear or a non-linear pattern? Anybody want to share their experience?
Jerry, I'll share a little bit.
Yeah,
since
go ahead,
I'm
Jerry.
in the 98%. It was sort of, I wouldn't call it linear, but I wouldn't call it non-linear either. It was
Okay.
like, started out, when I graduated high school, I thought I'd become a civil engineer, ended up becoming a chemical engineer, then ended up going to business school, and then went into consulting on, business process effectiveness. And along the way, I picked up supply chain skills.
Okay.
So, and that's sort of where I am now. So it wasn't quite nonlinear, but it certainly wasn't a straight line either.
Yeah. It sounds like it was related, but if you were going to be asked if you were going to be doing supply chain back then, you may not have.
I wouldn't have been able to. I realized when I was in the Boy Scouts and I was the quartermaster for a troop of 120 boys,
Wow.
I was in supply chain, but if you had used the phrase supply chain, I wouldn't have said, what the heck is that?
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Jerry. Does any of you remember Family Circus, that comic strip? There was a little boy, his mother would say, go to the grocery store or go ask our neighbor for some sugar or something like that. And so he would take these circuitous routes all over the place. And eventually he'd get to his destination, but he would get sidetracked. So that would be an example of a nonlinear path or pattern. So one of John Krumbold's main areas of focus was that luck is not accidental, that we in some ways create our own luck. So through unplanned events that pop up, chance occurrences, synchronicity, and we'll get to that a little bit later, intuitive hunches, and then gut feelings. So by being aware of our surroundings and being curious about what we experience, that can lead to possibilities to explore. So I remember Kathleen Mitchell was one of the developers of this. I went to a workshop of hers, and she had us all go. It was on a campus of the old Johnson and Wales campus in Denver, which I don't even think exists anymore. I think they're using it for Denver School District now for one of the focus schools. But she would just have go out and just walk wherever it feels interesting to you. You just follow your curiosity and see where it leads you. And then we'd come back and we'd share our experiences. And everybody's experience would be a little bit different because everybody's curious about different things. So one of the premises of Planned Happenstance is curiosity and following our curiosity and seeing where it takes us. Not just observing curiosity, but actually following it. So taking advantage of chance events. So when a door presents itself, we don't just say, okay, I see a door, it's open, I'll keep walking. Instead, if you're curious about what may be inside the door, or maybe the door is even closed and you open it and you go through it, the idea is we see where that leads us. And if it leads us to where we don't want to go, then we go back and keep walking. If we follow our curiosity and it's interesting and it leads us somewhere that could lead us in another direction, which could lead us in another direction, and so forth and so on. The idea is that we continue to follow our curiosity, and curiosity being a good thing. So we stay open to where our curiosity leads us. Another premise is being adaptable. So adapt changes in our environment. For instance, the pandemic, how we all had to adapt to that. We had no choice of being isolated. Although some of the essential workers weren't isolated, they were out there making deliveries and providing healthcare, but they had to adapt in other ways as far as being slammed with work and making other adjustments. So being adaptable is a very important premise of planned happenstance. And what do we do with those changes that we have to adapt to? Can we see them as opportunities rather than as a negative thing? So I'll throw this one out there to the group. How have any of you adapted to new experience that have shown up for you before?
I definitely fell back into an old, oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much a requirement that, you can, I've even found that when opportunities present themselves, sometimes even when you say no, they can be persistent.
Yes.
and force some adaptability one way or the other. And so, I think the willingness is much better if you can take it on actively rather than letting it hit and then doing reactively. Adaptation. So proactive is better than reactive.
Yeah. Do you have an example you can share for you?
Yeah, I mean, so there was a scenario where I got laid off from one of my positions in that particular role, but that did not mean that there wasn't another role available. And it was a contract role versus a full-time role, but it was still within the organization and still making an impact. And so, there was a situation where I could have said, no to that opportunity, and kind of. And it would have been much shorter of an experience for me to move into my new industry. But I knew that if I took that, then I could expand my experience and grow into more skills. And so, yeah, that was an opportunity that I really had to adapt to and be okay with, especially from the standpoint of even, losing a position technically, but still being able to make an impact. So.
Yeah, I can't see the participants. Tell me your name.
Oh, James. I think I might be on like a second screen.
What was it?
James.
James. Thanks, James. Thanks for sharing that.
Hey, Dan, there's a comment from Mari that I'm hoping that Mari can expand on just a little bit. Great comments, Mari, but she's wrote, I think I have adapted. I think I have, but I feel like I haven't been able to land yet. Can you go into a little more detail on that, Mari?
Sure. I feel like, okay, so I have 4 adult children and I've adapted to everything and all of their different careers and all of their different jobs, etc. And my own, trying to work on my own at the same time, from a 24-year career to some time off, and now ready, willing and able to do something wonderful for a new position with all of the skill sets that I have acquired and helped them as well. But I haven't been able to find for myself, and I don't know if I'm just being too picky, You know what I mean? It's like I have not been able to locate a position that will suit me. One day I'm thinking, okay, you know what? I'm going to start my business again. I'm going to start a different business. Then another day I'm going to say, I'm going to go work here. I get shadowed, I get accepted. And I say, no, it's not for me. I'm just really, really now, because I've come into my own. So I'm really very scrutinizing positions, like, oh my God, I don't want to be with those people. Oh my God, this is not for me. Oh my, you know what I mean? So I haven't been able to find it. Land, that's what I mean by land.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you got the adaptability part, Master Mari.
That's how I feel. Thank you for noticing. I appreciate that a lot.
So, okay, well, we'll go on. So I would just say, stay open to see what might show up next, and see where it leads. So there we go. So be open to new experiences. See new experiences as opportunities, even if they don't seem that way at first. I think, Jerry, you were saying that sometimes you get these nudges. They're persistent, even if you don't act on them immediately. If it's almost, if it's like the right thing for you to do, it keeps reminding you, hey, listen to me. So seeing new experiences as opportunities. And there might be more than one right answer. There's like a Zen cone, a teacher and a student. The student is talking to the teacher about a decision to make, and it says, well, this person I'm dealing with says this, and the teacher says, yeah, that's right. And then this other person I'm dealing with says this, and I don't agree with them. And the teacher says, yeah, that's right. So it's like both of them are right, but which one are you going to act on? So there may be more than one right answer. There may be 2 or 3 or more. Kind of a paradox, really. It usually is down to 2 where there's a paradox. So, and this is where you have to get courageous. So you make up your own mind in doing what your intuition is telling you is best for you, or your inner guidance system, however you want to look at it, and being willing to be the odd man or the odd woman out, even if those around you may not support you. But if it feels like, this is the right thing to do at the right time, being willing to take that chance, which can be very uncomfortable and very scary.
Dan, in that situation where there seems like there's 2 right things to do, doesn't it make sense to do the right one, right? Which fundamentally, right? But I mean, fundamentally, doesn't that mean you're going to have to rely on your intuition, right? That your gut really knows, right? Your head has determined that there's 2 right things to do, right? So you're going to ultimately do the right one, which really means your subconscious, whatever, your Carl Jung brain will come in and go, okay, this is really the right one, right? Which is your intuition, and right, your head will get out of the way and let you do the right thing.
Yeah, exactly, Trent. Yeah, I'm not even going to elaborate on that because you stated it really clearly. Yeah.
I guess one thing, it's particular to job searching though is timing, right? So if you're interviewing with multiple places, getting 2 offers on the same day or even in the same week,
that happens,
can be really challenging. And then if you're saying, I don't think this is the right one for me, but it's the one that comes through first, I think the other one's better for me, and they ultimately don't choose you, then that could leave you in a pretty tough spot.
Yeah, it can. So that is where trusting your inner guidance system can come into play. What's the right one for you? And maybe not getting a job at that point is the right thing. Maybe the timing isn't right. So when you get a disappointment, like an example that you just shared, Amy, correct? What can I learn from this disappointment? What might I be missing? So seeing it more as a learning experience. And it doesn't mean it's not painful. It still hurts when we get disappointed, but it's seen as a learning experience. I know most of you are probably already doing this. It's a good reminder. And then taking action. So when it feels right, and it may mean not taking action until it does feel right. So being prepared for unexpected opportunities. So in other words, keeping an open mind, staying curious. So think about, I'm going to throw this out to the group. Can any of you think about your last unexpected, here's a key word, unexpected opportunity that you didn't see coming?
I can share one. I'm Gaylen. I'm a nurse and I've just hit a semi-retirement point and was looking for something, and I discovered that a school district on the west side, on the western slope, needed a backup nurse for their outdoor ed center in this stunningly gorgeous desert area. And so I just got back last night from a week out there. It was a delight, and it was not something that I could have constructed or come up with, I don't think, before that. So
yeah. So what came as a result of that, Gaylen?
Well, I realized some things. One is that clarified that I really like being part of a community. I like having a bunch of people at the dinner table. I love a job where I can be outside a lot. So it helped confirm things that were resonant for me in terms of how I like my life to be composed, not just any work life in the future, but my life. So
yeah. So did you take the position?
Yeah, I spent the last week working there. It's a seasonal piece, so they're
okay.
wound down now, and it will roll around in the spring again. So
wow, thanks for sharing that. So this kind of gets back to the question on disappointments, but seeing mistakes as opportunities. So what are your experiences with mistakes? How have you dealt with them in the past? What can you learn from them? And seeing mistakes as feedback rather than failure. Some of you may have heard this story before, but there's a pilot who's flying from San Francisco to Honolulu, and every 15 minutes she checks her instrument panel and notices, oh wow, I'm 5 degrees off course. So immediately she adjusts her position, gets back on course. Another 15 minutes later, she's 10 degrees off course in the other direction. So this happens all the way until they land in Honolulu. Those off course experiences weren't failure. They were just feedback that the pilot fortunately learned from them and made the adjustment. So a different take on failure is feedback. So the key with failure is that we don't repeat the same failure over and over again. That's the definition of insanity, but we learn from the experience. Everybody want to share an experience they had with failure or with a mistake and how they learn from it?
Dan, I love that you put this in as an opportunity. Growing up, my dad used to tell me repeatedly, so it's embedded in my brain, everything that gets a little off course is just a growth opportunity. But you got to look at it that way, and you got to try and find that, because in the moment, it rarely feels like a growth opportunity. Trent and I were talking yesterday about, I have sat in failure for months, but I'm slowly shifting to, it was just a growth opportunity. What did I learn?
Yeah.
Fail early and often, right? I mean, you know, failure is a good thing, right? It's a learning opportunity. It's like you learned what doesn't work, right? I mean, yeah.
Right. And if we grew up in a family or a culture that gave us negative feedback when we make mistakes, we're super sensitive to screwing up, so we don't even take chances. So we have to overcome those early experiences so we can see mistakes and failure and learn from them and see them as feedback. So, you know, that can come into play too, early experiences and having to overcome them.
Right. When you think about it, that's how everyone learns how to walk, right? You stand up, you fall down, you stand up, you fall down, right? I mean, you take a few steps, you fall down, but no one gives up, right? Everyone eventually learns how to walk.
Yeah, as long as they aren't criticized for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Reminds me of the marshmallow experiment. So during
share the marshmallow experiment. It's a great experiment.
So during one of my trainings at a prior company, they had told us about it. So they took a group of kindergartners and a group of MBA students, and they had some various materials, including like straws and marshmallows, and pitted the groups against each other for who could, within a certain amount of time, make the highest structure. And the kindergartners won because they're more willing to try things and fail, whereas the MBA students spend all their time trying to plan, and rather than actually trying, you know, with the materials, they're just sitting there planning, and so they don't see what works in real time.
Yeah, that's a great example. It reminds me of Carol Dweck out of University of California at Berkeley experiment with mindset, how a fixed mindset, you're afraid to make mistakes. With a growth mindset, mistakes are part of learning and growing. So, you know, thanks for sharing that example. So another characteristic of happenstance is that realizing that our interests change as we grow and as we learn. And we don't see where they may change to. So we may end up becoming a totally different person as a result of changing interests. So as we go through life and new experiences, our interests can change depending on our environmental factors as well. Culture, environmental factors, physical factors. So we learn and grow. So we take action to create our own luck. So if we're open to new opportunities as they present themselves and then act on it, others may see that as luck, but by acting on it, we create our own luck. Others may see it as luck that's just kind of coincidence, but by acting on it, we're creating our own luck. So seeing new opportunities in events that show up in our life, and if they're something that can benefit us and acting on them, we're creating our own luck. So this is a little side avenue of John Krumbold's work. Says, go for the job first, as long as it's not too out of the ordinary, and learn the skills once you get the job. So claiming competency based on future learning, and this is future learning that you know you can learn these skills, not something out of the ordinary, not, you know, applying for a job as a professional athlete or trying out for a professional when you know you don't have that. But that's way out of the ordinary, but something within reach. You know, something within reach, you know, claiming competence based on future learning and future interests. So seeing a potential new job as a learning opportunity. I never accepted a job I already knew how to do, is an example that John Krumbold shared. Now this isn't for everybody, but it is a concept of planned happenstance. Go for the job first, then learn the skills. Now, not every employer is going to hire you based on that, but some might. If you show you can convince them that you can learn the skills and you have the ability. So
I've seen that work really well in some circumstances and fail miserably in others, even though you would think the skills are equally learnable. So, you know, It's
Yeah.
the, I think there was a YouTube video, fake it till you make it,
Right.
which is essentially what that is, but there's a certain amount of credibility to it.
Yeah, I personally have never been qualified for every job I've had since college. I was unqualified for on paper.
Can you share an example, Trent?
Oh yeah, I mean, I have a degree in peace and conflict studies. My first job out of college was assembling a collimator for an astrophysics, for a spectrometer of an astrophysics satellite.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, my last job was to be an HR manager. I have zero HR training. It was to be the contracts manager. I have zero contracts training. It was to interface with IP attorneys. I have no IP training. So yeah, I mean, yeah.
So, but it must have been a job you were interested in, though, to convince them that you could learn the skills. Am I in the ballpark?
They asked me to do it, so I did it.
Got it. Okay.
So, yeah. So my point is just, just go with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just don't. Just be willing. They asked me. I already worked there. They asked me to do it, so I, be open to it, right? I mean, if you're not going to,
Yeah, you were fortunate in that you were already there and they were asking you to do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Those weren't all new positions that I went out and applied for. Those were all new roles, but yeah.
Well, you also had the advantage that you probably were well thought of for the skills that are never on the job description that were required to be successful at that organization.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Now we've got a couple of hands up.
Yes, Sue, do you go ahead with your comment?
Yes, thank you. Sue Itaki, I've been in QA and testing and in the tech industry for quite a while. I actually had a couple jobs earlier this year, but chronically underemployed. But this can be a tricky balance with the fake it till you make it and with the based on future learning, because the technology keeps changing under you, and that is fine. I am so adaptable, okay, fine. Now it's this command instead of that command. I'm fine with that. But it's a tricky influencing to convince them how capable you are at turning on a dime and learning the new stuff. So you give your past examples of where, this technology changed. And I deal with it all the time in software testing, because at the time that we wrote the agile user story, this was the case, and this is what we wanted, and here's the acceptance criteria. But that by time we're almost done with it, a lot of the surrounding things changed, and I have to keep my eye on that. Yeah, and I illustrate it well in my interviewing, and I make it all the way to the full panels, but the full panels, they have to be unanimous. If you don't get unanimous, then it doesn't happen. And it's hard to get unanimous when you're saying, yes, I haven't used that technology. I've used this other technology. It's very similar, but somebody in the room on that full panel interview doesn't think you can do it.
Yeah.
And some of it is female, male. I know that in general, maybe I don't speak up for my own capabilities as much as a guy would, because I know I can do it, but I know I need to convince you. So I wait till I have proof.
Okay, I see what you're saying. It's definitely a risky situation, and it could lead to failure. But is it a risk worth taking? Is the question. So
what risk am I not taking?
By not applying for that job and not going to that interview. I mean, aren't you?
Oh, I apply for it and I get the full panel interview. Yes.
Yeah,
I do.
So you took the chance. You didn't get it, but you did learn from the experience, and maybe next time you would get it.
Okay. Yeah, I've got 3 or 4 of those under my belt just over the past several months. Thank you.
Great. Now your confidence is clear, strong and clear. So I can see this approach may very well work for you, because you speak very highly of your ability.
Well, it's tricky to do that in the interview situation. I think my tone might change too much.
Yeah, interviews are scary. Indeed.
With respect to the time, Dan, it's rounding around 9:42. Mari had a comment, but I'm not sure how much else is left on your
we can go to 10. We can go to 10.
Okay. Mari, did you have something brief to share?
Just real quick, fake it till you make it. I used that for many years in my career in real estate. Mm-hmm. And people have gotten very sophisticated, very specialized. And as soon as I see a person that is faking it till they make it, I am so disgusted. I'm sorry, that's my comment.
Well, I hear you, Mari. But what if you can see the potential and if they were speaking from their heart rather than just trying to put one over on you? What if you can see the potential and based on what they already know?
Exactly. And I see young people doing that, like when I'm around them, and they, they do, like my own kids, they have potential and they really don't know what they don't know, but they're trying their best. So yeah. Sure. Okay, thanks. Sure. Yeah, I just had to say that though.
Yeah. Have any of you heard of laughter yoga? So laughter yoga it's from a doctor in India, and there's these different laughter exercises, and you do it in a group. And even though you may not be feeling like you want to laugh, you go through these exercises and it still has the same beneficial health, like it stimulates the immune system, reduces stress. So the idea is you fake it until you make it, and as you finish the exercise, you actually are laughing with everybody else. So it's a little bit different than what we're talking about in a career field, but it's still kind of a fake it till you make it concept. So everyone is your teacher. If you can keep that framework, even somebody you despise or don't like, or a manager you're struggling with, why am I here? What can I learn from this individual? Maybe they're showing me in contrast what I really don't want to do. What is it that I really do want to do? So, what can we learn from every encounter, even if it's uncomfortable? What can we learn from those experiences? Okay, so here's John Krumboldt's story, and you can YouTube this. He'll just describe his experience. I'll describe it as best I can. So John grew up in a little town in Iowa, and he graduated from high school, and he was on a tennis team in high school, and he decided to enroll at the local university. I can't remember what it was called, and he didn't know what he wanted to major in. So he just started taking classes, and he got a letter from admissions saying, you need to choose a major. He blew it off. Later in the semester, you got another letter that says you got to choose a major. He blew it off, and then he got one third letter. So we're gonna end your stay at the college unless you choose a major. So he goes to his college tennis coach. Now he's on a college tennis team, and he says, "Coach, I get this letter from admissions. They're going to kick me out of school. I don't know what to major. What should I major in?" And the coach, who's a psychology teacher, also says, "Well, psychology, of course." So John says, "Okay, thanks." And he goes off. He's got 15 minutes to spare. He signs his papers with admissions and puts down his major of psychology. So he ends up getting a degree in psychology. He goes to the military after his undergrad. He comes back, and then he goes into graduate school. Eventually gets a job at Stanford University. Becomes a psychologist, and he never would have guessed this. And the other part of the story he tells is that the neighborhood he lived in, which brought him to tennis, he was out riding his bike. He used to like to go ride his bike, and he was exploring the neighborhood. And one day he sees this friend from elementary school he hadn't seen in years out in his lawn, and he stops his bike, and he gets off his bike, and he interacts with his friend. and they reacquaint themselves, and his friend said, hey, you want to play ping pong with me? So they go downstairs in their friend's house, and John says, I don't know how to play ping pong, but I'm willing to learn. So he learns how to play ping pong. And then his friend says, well, I've got a tennis racket. My sister got one too, and she doesn't play tennis. I play tennis. You want to come and play tennis with me? John says, no, I don't know how to play tennis, but I'm willing to learn. So they go out and learn how to play tennis together. So he gets on the high school tennis team eventually. And again, that led to the story that I relayed to you earlier, which was one unplanned event after another. And he talks about this. He says, I had no clue I wanted to go into psychology and be a psychologist, but I was open. I was willing to learn and follow these stories or these experiences that led from one unplanned event to another. So, how has happenstance played out in your own life? I'll give you an example of my own. So, when I moved from my hometown in the East Bay, about 30 miles east of San Francisco, I moved to the peninsula and San Jose area because I had a business opportunity, and it didn't pan out. And I started taking a few classes at a community college. I had taken some in Concord as well, close to Concord. And I just started taking odd jobs because I had to pay my rent. So various odd jobs, and I was getting frustrated. And I took this one job from a temp agency. They found me a job at a childcare center. I thought, okay, it'd be fun working with kids. It wasn't. It was overwhelming. So I applied for another job. It was at a company called Consulting Psychologist Press in Palo Alto, California. And it was a job, it was a data analyst job. And they said, well, here, thanks for applying for the position. We're going to give you a couple of assessments. And they gave me the Myers-Briggs and the Strong Interest Inventory. These were two assessments that they published back then. So they went over them with me and they said, here are your results. And I thought, wow, this is fascinating. They said, well, you'd make a lousy data analyst, but you can keep your results. Thanks for coming. We'll see you later. So not long after that, I had a free afternoon and I went out and played 9 holes in this public course. And it was slow. And this guy joined me who was behind me, and we started talking, and he worked at the local community college. And I told him I was looking for work, and he says, hey, the off-campus site has a position in admissions. Why don't you apply for it? And, here's the contact information. So I did, and I interviewed for the job. I liked the people there. I got the job, and I started working there. I met some of the counselors. I liked that, and one thing led to another, and I started working in student services with the counselors, and went on and got my undergrad degree. I thought I was going to be an environmental education teacher. Then I decided, after talking to the counselors over and over and over again, there helped me choose my career, I decided, wow, what am I doing? I can do this too. So I immediately finished my bachelor's degree, got a general environmental studies degree, got a minor in psychology, and then got admitted to University of San Francisco. I got a graduate degree in counseling psychology, moved out to Colorado, and got a job. It took me a while though. I started my private practice back then, and eventually I got a job at Red Rocks Community College, and then went through various positions there. But I had no idea. I would never have thought in a million years that's what I wanted to do. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a forest ranger or a professional baseball player. So that's how happens. That's an example of happenstance for me. Anybody want to share their own example? Any of you have an example of happenstance? Maybe you don't.
I've got a great one just from the summer.
Yeah.
I was in one of those full panel interviews. They like me. I even got feedback that they'd love to hire me, but they got a budget freeze.
Mm.
So in the meantime, I marched right to community college and enrolled in an ASL, American Sign Language coursework. And I can't get certified right away. You have to have several years under your belt, but growing up with a deaf sister, I know a non-ASL language very well, but I just need to make the transition. So every sign that I know, there's a different sign for it. So that's what I'm doing the transition now.
That's a
but I
strong
went to
metaphor.
ASL night downtown Denver in September. And I wouldn't have known about that if I didn't enroll in this class. And I wouldn't have enrolled in this class if I wasn't so pissed off about all these full panel interviews that I keep getting and not getting the job. And so there's something about just heading headlong into whatever that may end up working out for me, because through that ASL night, I'm signing with, deaf members. And there was a City and County of Denver table with Office of Sign Language Services. And I'm talking to a deaf intern there who says, oh, you should apply for this job. It's a deaf program specialist, someone who does outreach.
Yeah.
And, since I've been a speaker at Star East, which is the International Test Conference in 2018. I'm not shy.
For some reason, I'm picking that up.
But I'm also and I don't know if you've seen the play version of Legally Blonde, but there's a scene and a song that's not in the movie as strongly as it is in the play. You need a chip on your shoulder to come across more forcefully. So I think I've been building that chip.
Okay. That's a fascinating story. And there's a real strong metaphor there too, that you're taking that sign language course. There's a sign.
Am I the only one that can't hear anymore?
No, I lost audio.
Yeah, I completely lost it after he said sign language course.
Oh, okay. Well, what I saw when I heard your story was that that experience, particularly taking the sign language course, was a sign you got as far as what to do next. Did you hear that?
Yeah. You're back.
Okay. Okay, good. Okay. Any other stories? And what other story somebody might want to share about a happenstance example in your own life?
And I want to do a quick heads up on the time. It's about 5 minutes till 10. One for you, Dan, and then 2 for shifting into our introductions. So just as a heads up.
Okay. Last story, if anybody wants to share one. Okay.
Well, I can't speak. It's not about me personally, but I can. The last company I worked for, the gentleman who ultimately became our president came to our company because he happened to share a chairlift with the head of our software engineering group. And they just got to talking about, what do you do? What do you do? It's kind of it also speaks to the power of networking. They happened to share a chairlift. And introduced, hi, I'm Bob. Hi, I'm Vince. What do you do? And ultimately, Bob became the president of our company, and it just took off from there. And it was just purely because they happened to share a chairlift heading up the mountain, and struck up a conversation. And
yeah, and they could have both made the decision not to talk to one another, and nothing would have come out of it. But they did talk, and something did come out of it.
Yeah, exactly. They could have just sat there blowing their noses and, listening to their iPods or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So
I love talking to people on chairlifts, and I actually met my husband on a chairlift. So that was my happenstance.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So thank you for sharing that. And you have my contact information, so feel free to share other stories that come up if you want to. Okay, so when you were a child, I was asked this. Do you remember being asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? And how did you respond?
Yes.
How did you feel when you were asked that question?
I still ask this question to grown-ups because I think we're still trying to figure out what it is we do want to do. And I think so much of what your topic is right now, the happenstance of how you get into jobs. In my experience, I call it you backdoored a job, just based out of it's who you know or it's how you get into a situation. So I think we're all looking to figure out what is that true full alignment. It's kind of that North Star.
Yeah, and so the planned happenstance approach on this, that's a lot of pressure to put on a little kid. So there may be, because when I was asked, I didn't have a response to that, and some children will just make something up to satisfy the adult who's asking them that question and say, oh, that's wonderful. Here's what you need to do. Stay in touch with me. And then the next time they see them, they ask them, how's it going? And the kid doesn't really want to do that career. So another way to ask that question might be to ask, what might be fun to try next? Because it doesn't put a lot of pressure on them, but it also gets them to think about, okay, what can I do next and what might be fun, what might be enjoyable. So think about that. So synchronicity was a term that Swiss psychologist Carl Jung came up with. And his definition was, it describes seemingly unrelated coincidences between a physical and a psychological event. So his story that he writes about and shares is called the Golden Scarab story. And he had a client in his office that he was working with, and she was struggling, and he was struggling helping her. And she was relating a dream she had the night before about this golden scarab coming to visit her. And immediately upon sharing her story, there was a tapping in the window behind Carl Jung, and it was a beetle. And it was in Switzerland, it's the closest type of beetle to a golden scarab that they had. And he opened the window, and the scarab flew in and landed on his shoulder. He grabbed it, handed it to his client, and said, here's your golden scarab. And it shook her up so much that at that point she kind of got unstuck out of her head and started making progress. And Jung said that's the only time anything like that's ever happened. And he couldn't explain why, other than calling it a synchronistic event. The comic strip. Any of you remember Dennis the Menace? Reading a comic strip? I know there's a movie made out of it. But any of you remember the comic strip? Hank Ketchum? Yes. That started in 1951 in March 12th. Interestingly enough, in England, 3 days later, a character called Dennis the Menace, also wearing a red and black striped shirt, made his debut in a children's comic strip called The Beano. And he was also called Dennis the Menace. Both of the cartoonists claimed they had no clue what the other one was doing. And there's been some studies on this done, and they were showing that there's no causal connection of why they both came up with this Dennis the Menace character basically at the same time. And both cartoonists agreed to let the other one do their own thing. The one in England wasn't as friendly and kind. It was more of a mean-spirited Dennis Menace than the one in the United States, which was kind-hearted but very mischievous. So that's another example of a synchronistic event, which leads me to some of the research on non-locality. and the differences between brain versus the mind. So non-locality says that our brain isn't local, basically, and our mind isn't local. Our brain is part of our body and acts as a filter to the information that is limitless, and that we can tap into that information and make sense of it through our brain. So some of the research on this shows that that's how we pick up insights, intuitive hunches, and inspiration from this universal mind. Carl Jung called it the collective unconscious. Larry Dossey, who's a physician, calls it the one mind. Rupert Sheldrake calls it morphic resonance. But the idea is that we can tap into this knowledge and utilize it. The Stanford Research Institute out of Stanford, actually it was Menlo Park, California, right next to Palo Alto, where Stanford was, during the Cold War, did research on remote viewing. And remote viewing, they had intelligence reports that Russia was doing remote viewing on United States sites. And basically what a remote viewer is they get into a meditative state of consciousness, and with the intent of going somewhere and trying to find information about that place. So they started finding individuals at Stanford Research Institute, also called SRI, to do this and spy on Russia. And they were successful. The information is public now. They stopped collecting it in the 1990s, and you can read about this remote viewing, and there's still experiments on remote viewing. So, if you believe in this, if you're open to this, we can tap into this one mind, so to speak, when we're receptive, such as when we're meditating, maybe being prayerful, being in nature, taking a walk, taking a shower, when we're out of our normal waking consciousness. Sometimes when we're dreaming. Many famous inventions were discovered during dreams. And another way is in this hypnagogic state, which is that not awake, not asleep state, just before we fall asleep. We can get some insights. If we're receptive to them, we can write them down, or upon awakening. Any of you want to elaborate on that or share that? I know we're running out of time, but I think this is an important point here. We've pretty much finished. Anybody want to elaborate on that or comment on that whole idea of a mind beyond our brain that we can tap into and utilize?
I would like to mention something to that effect, because during the pandemic, yes, I have gone into those, I tapped into all of that, and it's telling me to just not do nothing and just keep doing what I'm doing, which is not paying the bills. It's not giving me the lifestyle that I want. It's not, conducive to what, but it keeps telling me that. So I don't know how to break that. Maybe I need that thing to come through the window.
No, the scarab beetle, right? Does it feel right, or does it feel off to you?
How often have each of us been tackling some sort of problem, seeking a solution to some sort of question, churning away at it, and then step away, go do something else, relax, and have the answer come to you that way?
Yes. Yeah. I would say most of us have at some point.
Yeah, I think that's really common. It's kind of that, I can't think, you're going to say something, you can't think of it, and then as soon as you stop trying to think of it, then it pops into your brain, right? It seems like a similar phenomenon.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, there are also
there's a lot.
accounts of a number of very creative people who, in that hypnagogic experience, keeping writing materials and note-taking paper, whatever, on the bedside table, because flashes of insight or ideas will come to them quick, want to jot it down, because 10 minutes later you won't be able to recall what it was.
Yes.
But those insights that we draw from somewhere, whether you say subconscious or whatever,
Yeah.
They happen, they're there, take advantage of them.
Yeah, particularly if they're useful to you. Okay, well, these are some of the resources, and I'm happy to share these with the group as well. There's more, but these are just a few of them. And that's my presentation.
Cool. Well, thank you very, very much. This is fantastic.
Thank you for letting me do this and participating. I appreciate the participation and the openness of the group.
Dan, all of your contact information is in the contact sheet, so people can get back in contact with you.
Yeah, it's in my bio, so my email and phone number is and website is there.
Okay, beautiful.
Okay.
Awesome. We will make sure that all of Dan's information is accessible for everybody who is able to attend to Dan. So we'll get all of that posted in the chat. I know you're going to have to jump off momentarily, Dan, but we'll make sure we get all of the, I'm going to put those resources into the chat, as well as how to get a hold of you. So thank you so much for the presentation. It was great.
Thank you all. I appreciate it. And yeah, I'll let you get on with the networking part of the meeting. So y'all take care. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Stop
you.
the recording.
Yeah, can you stop that, Trent?
Yeah, hang on a second. I don't know if I can do that while I'm sharing. Hang on a second.